Welcome to the Decipher podcast. My name is Dennis Fisher. I'm here with my colleague, Lindsay O'Donnell Welch, and our very special guest, Wendy Nather. Wendy, it's so great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Are you kidding? You and I have talked about this movie many times over the years. And
usually in bars.
Yes, almost always in bars. And there's a good reason that we wanted to have you on this episode specifically. We're talking about the movie Real Genius, a favorite of mine, and I know a favorite of yours for a specific reason that we're going to get into. I have a love for this movie that I'm not sure is like on par with like the actual quality of the movie. I love this movie. And after, rewatching it last night, like, the plot's pretty thin. It's just kind of a lot of gags that they hang some plot off of. There's just a lot of one-liners. You can tell that it was kind of written in chunks over the years, but I love it so much. I know you do too, Wendy. And Lindsay, surprise, Wendy, Lindsay had never seen this before.
Oh my goodness.
I'm the odd one out, and I got to have my very first watch last night. So
okay, so
coming
it's
fresh off my first watch here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested. We started talking about it at the end of the War Games podcast a couple of weeks ago with Pete and Zoe, and I forget what the reference was why we started talking about it, and I could see Lindsay's eyes were kind of like, what the hell are they talking about? I'm not sure what this movie is. Lindsay, had you heard of it? Did you know that it existed?
Literally never heard of it. Yep. I'm very glad my eyes have been opened.
It's a very 80s artifact, like not specifically in the War Games way of the technology and, that sort of thing, but just the sort of goofy, let's have a gratuitous scene with a bunch of people in bikinis and like the dopey things like that were just such a thing in the 80s. What was your first impression while you were watching it, Linz?
I think it was exactly what you just said. Like it's a very encapsulates like a very much an 80s movie. Even just the humor I thought was really refreshing compared to a lot of the movies that I see nowadays where, it's a little more witty, I would say. I really liked it. I didn't realize that was Val Kilmer's, I think it was like his second or third movie.
Like
so he was looking really young in that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought it was great.
Yeah. It's such a fun movie. Like, you can just kind of like vibe with it the whole time. There's a space laser involved and things like that, but there's not really any stakes in the movie. It's just a bunch of goofballs at like a knockoff Caltech / MIT university, just playing pranks on each other and, being goofballs, with some, good-natured stuff thrown in. I love it so much. Wendy, I know that I mentioned earlier the reason we wanted to have you on, both because we love you and you have like a specific sort of connection to this movie. I don't know if you want to get into it now or maybe we can talk about it when we talk about the actual plot. It's up to you.
Well, we can start. This is, everybody's got their own, hacker movie that for them symbolizes hackers, whether it's War Games or hackers or sneakers or, you name it. But this is my hacker movie. And it's mostly because I used to hang out with a bunch of ARPANET hackers in the 80s, and they were just like these characters. And I think part of it is because back then, there weren't any stakes. It wasn't like, we were being chased by evil people and we weren't fighting anybody. There were no break-ins. It was just us being goofballs. And we would do everything from, back then there wasn't a lot of access management or anything. And we all knew that if we wanted to log into certain machines, we could just do what we called RMSing in. Richard M. Stallman just set his password to RMS, and so we just knew we could log in as RMS whenever we needed access to a particular server someplace on the ARPANET. so it was very carefree. There was a lot of maker stuff going on. There was a lot of physical exploration of buildings, not just, the steam tunnels under Pacific Tech, but, the actual tunnels at MIT. Anytime we went to a hotel, some of us would start, exploring through places they weren't supposed to be. We called it vatting. It was kind of, there was a text-based game called ADV, and this was kind of ADV sideways, so we called it vatting. Kind of like adventure. So, they would try to find a place where they could get underneath the hotel swimming pool and then bang on it with a hammer. And we'd break into the linen closets and get everybody extra pillows and, all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of hijinks, just like the movie. And that's why I feel so close to it.
Yeah, it's funny because anybody who knows you now and doesn't know sort of your backstory, which, I happen to know, probably wouldn't have guessed any of that stuff about you, that you were, a little bit more mischievous in your early days. That's something that maybe they might guess about me, but maybe not you. So yeah, I love that sort of, it's not really text in this movie, but it's sort of the subtext of that's who these folks are, Chris Knight and not so much Mitch Taylor, but Chris Knight and all the students who are at Pacific Tech when Mitch, the 15-year-old prodigy, gets there.
Oh, we had a Mitch Taylor. We had a young person hanging out with us. That's another story, which I might have told you, but we won't bring it up in this family podcast.
This is not a family podcast. But yeah, there's such a good sort of, it's not a get your crew together movie the way that Sneakers is, where, they have this person who does this and this person who does that. It's just a bunch of really smart people who are kind of screwing around while they kind of, wander their way towards advanced degrees or whatever it is and try not to build space weapons. But there is kind of the hacker ethos underlying this. In not so much the technological way, but more of that exploratory and let's see how far we can push things without really getting in too much trouble, both in terms of the steam tunnels, but also later on towards the end where Laszlo is brute forcing the satellite system to, make sure that they blow up the professor's house and not, the target that they're trying to hit. So
yeah, or getting free coffee from the vending machine by using the frozen
liquid nitrogen.
Yes. Liquid nitrogen.
Genius.
Yeah, just everything like that. Or creating. Not that we ever did this, but creating the
ice slide.
Ice slide. Yeah. Just for fun, and then it sublimated. So no harm, no foul.
Right. It disappeared really quickly. No water. Straight to gas.
Yeah.
The explosion.
Right. Yeah.
Unless there was going to be an explosion. Yeah.
Lindsay, did you know anything about, I don't know if you looked into this at all when you were watching the movie or looked it up on IMDb or anything. Do you know about the MIT pranks and that kind of stuff that a lot of this is based on?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, this is even better then.
It's based on actual pranks.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very, very loosely. So there's this whole tradition at MIT specifically, and I think also Caltech, if I'm not wrong, Wendy, where the students do pranks that they call hacks. And this started in I want to say the 50s, 60s. And they're very elaborate in a lot of cases. If you look them up, one of the most famous ones at MIT is the students got a full-size car and put it on top of the MIT dome. I forget the name of that building.
I think it was a squad car.
It was a car that they painted like a police car with the working lights and sirens. and it was on top of the MIT Dome, whatever that building is called. I can't remember, but it's the one at the top of the MIT Quad in Cambridge. There's all kinds of other ones. If you look it up, there's an MIT museum exhibit dedicated to all this stuff. Most of them are, relatively harmless.
They take a lot of engineering and a lot of planning, which is what these students are so good at.
Right.
Yeah.
In the
I was going to say that's very impressive to pull off.
And that's kind of where the really early origins of the hacker ethos came from. Is these are called hacks. The people that did them are called hackers. It had nothing to do with technology. It sort of moved that way later on towards the phone system and the computer networks later on. But part of the whole culture was you weren't supposed to actually do any damage. Sometimes they would actually leave instructions on how to unwind what they had done. Here's how you can get this car off the roof of your building, or, sometimes it has something to do with street lights or things like that, very clever and very creative stuff, but not harmful and not damaging. So there's that whole backstory to it too.
That's so interesting. And, to Wendy's point, I feel like so many of the hacker scenes that we see in movies nowadays just don't encapsulate that at all, right? It's just, the hacker in the hoodie, doing their thing, very serious. But when I think of, Real Genius, or I think of, other War Games or some of these other movies that we talk about, that kind of tongue-in-cheek, happy-go-lucky, hijinks, backdrop is something that really is important, I think. So I love that.
Yeah. I think it's really important too, because, even in War Games, the last one we did, Matthew Broderick isn't really he's trying to get a video game. He's trying to get early access to a video game is how that thing all starts. There's no real harm involved. Yes, he's stealing some IP, I guess, but he's not literally trying to start a thermonuclear war or, cause any actual property damage. He just wants access to a new video game. In Sneakers is a different story, but yeah, it sort of goes after that when you get to the movie hackers or the net or things like that.
Darker over time.
Very much so. Both the story and the aesthetic of the movies themselves. If you try to watch the movie Hackers now, every scene is dark or there's neon in it, or that, it's a very 90s thing with the techno soundtrack and all that kind of stuff too. But, this is, you could tell, even if you didn't know what year this was made, 1985, you look at it and you're like, that movie is from...
That is so 80s. Yeah.
Mid 80s, yes. The feathered hair, which you mentioned to me, offline, Lindsay. Val Kilmer, everybody, Mitch Taylor's hair is just incredible. The butt cut with the feather. Oh, it's incredible.
I love it.
So 80s. Yeah. It's not just the girls. It's mostly the guys had those haircuts. It's, little known fact. So you mentioned, Linz, this is Val Kilmer's definitely his breakout role. I think he had been in Top Secret before this, which was, a spoof and was, it did well, but it's not one of those movies that's lived on forever. But this made him a star. And then immediately after this, he was in Top Gun. And then Willow and, eventually my favorite movie of all time, Heat, and a few Tombstone, which I love as well. But there were no real stars in this movie when it came out. Maybe William Atherton was the biggest name in this movie. Yeah. Don't you think, Wendy?
Yeah, it was Ghostbusters before or after this?
Yes, it was before this.
Okay, so he played such a wonderful jerk.
Yes,
in both of those roles, and Dave Lewis was just saying the other day that he's pretty sure that any actor that can play a jackass like that has got to be the nicest person in the world in real life. That's his theory.
I always think about that because Atherton was this same kind of character in Ghostbusters, kind of an officious jerk in this. And then also in Die Hard, a couple years later, he's the jerk TV reporter.
Yeah, yeah.
Who McClane's wife eventually punches in the face, which is just great. But somehow got typecast as the biggest 80s, jackass. But
Yeah.
yeah, probably a very nice guy. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, nobody else in the rest of the cast was really a name. It was,
No, no.
and I don't think the movie was really sold on anybody's name. It didn't do very well at the box office. I went and looked that up. It was like 85 when this came out was a tough year. It's like Back to the Future, Beverly Hills Cop, The Goonies, Rocky IV, like some all-time classics came out that year.
Yeah.
Real Genius was way down the list at like number 65 or something like that. But I think it's definitely lived on in the hacker community as a classic, and it's one of those movies that you will always find on, TBS or something like that on a Saturday afternoon. And it's super fun to just drop into at any point. So Lindsay, when you really didn't have any idea of what the plot was when you sat down to watch?
Not really. I mean, yeah. So I knew there was some sort of like college aspect to it, having seen the trailer, but yeah, I had no idea what I was in for.
Yeah. I always forget the beginning where, there's the whole, kind of spooky military meeting with the CIA guys and the government contractors. And they're just like, oh, it's both immoral and unethical. That's great. When can we have it? Talking about this.
And the one guy going, I urge you to stop.
Right. Yes. There has to be the one person that's protesting, and he walks out the door and the CIA guy's like, okay, well, I guess we have to kill him now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have to liberate George.
Liberate. Yes. Not liquidate, liberate.
Yes.
Which is also like such an 80s movie trope of just the government, the shadowy government agencies doing things you're not really sure about, but it always has something to do with like off the books assassinations or, some weird military program that we're paying for, but we don't really know what it's doing.
Yeah.
And then we move into the Mitch Taylor portion of the program where you just have this like very buttoned up kid at a science fair explaining like a brand new laser technology. And this is where we meet Atherton's character, Jerry Hathaway, I think his last name is, who is somehow, they don't really explain it, but he's like a celebrity. Everybody knows who he is. He's like signing autographs
because he was on the TV show.
Right.
Yeah, I'm Professor Hathaway with everything.
Everything is the name of the TV show.
It's kind of like the Nova, parody.
Right. But very clearly like a public access cable show where it's just him, the one episode that they show us is before Kent spoils it, is him trying to explain what the colon is. Yeah. And he's supposed to be like a physics professor. Like, why is he explaining human anatomy to people? But
because he's with everything.
He knows everything. Yes.
But I love when he walks in and, everybody gets excited and the little teacher, she gets so excited and she wants to ask him, this is one of my favorite lines, she said, I have a question. Oh, actually, no, she wants to know what Einstein is really like. And Hathaway says, dead.
Yes.
And then he moves on and Mitch's mom, she said, I saw your show on radioactive isotopes and I have a question. And he goes, yeah. And she says, is that your real hair? And now every time I preface something with what I want to ask somebody a question, I really want to go straight to, is that your real hair? But, too few people will get it.
I would have gotten it, but you can't ask me that question, obviously.
Yeah.
There are so many, and I had forgotten this. I hadn't seen this movie in a couple of years, probably. I had forgotten how much of the dialogue is just set up punchline.
Yes.
It's so there, especially Val Kilmer's dialogue.
Yes.
Which he didn't do a ton of these type of comedies after this, really. Like he was more of a dramatic actor for most of his career, but he's really good at this. I got
such a crush on him from watching this movie.
Come on. Yeah, of course. He's really good as like the smart ass, he never they don't really play up his looks or how handsome he is or anything like that. It's more of him just being like this really smart, charismatic guy,
Yeah.
Who everybody it's, the classic, everybody wants to be him type guy,
Yeah.
and
I loved his dialogue, like the cha-cha scene.
Yeah.
When he like just the setup and the build and then like just cracking the joke.
yeah,
That's
take
great.
one step forward. No, I'm sorry. One step back. One
Oh,
step
wait,
forward.
now step forward.
Yeah.
And now step back. And now we're cha-chaing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, it is. You can tell that whoever the writers were had a really good time writing those, the dialogue for Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
He gets obviously all the home run lines, but there's a few for Mitch. There's a few for Jordan as well.
Mm-hmm.
Who I wanted to ask you about Jordan as well, Wendy. She reminds me of about 700 different people I know in the hacker community. Just like over caffeinated, hyper smart, want to tell you everything that they know all the time in like 4 seconds. And you're just like, oh my God, hang on, hold on. Just take a breath. Like when we meet her, she just spouts off this like stream of consciousness dialogue at Mitch about how she never sleeps. And then she comes back and she knitted him a sweater like overnight. And he's just like, what? I'm sorry, what? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that one of the people I hung out with was the model, or at least one of the models, but probably the model for Jordan, for real. Her name is Phyllis Lee, and she went by Liralyn at the time. And she did so many of the things that were written into Jordan's character. She was into making things. She loved to spin her own yarn. She worked on making I think it's called a ring shawl, one that is crocheted so fine that you can pass it through a wedding ring. And I actually have I still have 2 placemats that she crocheted for me as a wedding present. And she was always she did hardware hacking. She played soccer. She had a Newfoundland puppy named Fezzik. And apparently when the screenwriters interviewed her, she was wearing a sweater that she had made. She had knitted it overnight because she was cold. And so, it was so true to life. And in the show notes, I think we're going to include a link to a Slate article that she wrote explaining about, that time and her role in helping to be the model for Jordan, and why it was, some people didn't like the character. It didn't like the characterization because it was kind of modeling women in tech as women that have to fit themselves into the tech scene, like by being one of the guys. Like they couldn't be as feminine as they wanted to be. And I felt the same way during that period of time. I felt like I had to fit in as one of the guys because I was like usually the only woman in there. So,
yeah, I can sort of see that point of view very well because they do, she wears overalls through the whole movie. She's got a very short haircut. She doesn't hang out with any other women. She's the only real female character in the movie aside from, a couple of ancillary. She's the only main female character really. And they do sort of portray her as just one of the guys, which, is cool, but you can tell even in the 1985 sort of era, she's not super comfortable with that. She's like, well, I'm not exactly like you guys. Yeah, I'm really smart and I do this stuff, but I can also knit you a sweater and I can do this, a bunch of other cool shit. But they show her like stripping the wooden floor in her room at one point at like 2 a.m. She's just, yeah.
And she creates a rebreather to play with in the pool. And
the pool scene, yeah.
So it's like they felt like they needed a token female character in there, and they said, well, let's not make her too much like one of the boys. Let's have her knit, and then let's I don't know if we should spoil what happens later or not.
Oh, go right ahead.
I mean, Mitch kisses her. So, it's like she's the love interest because you can't have a woman in those movies who wasn't a love interest. Like she had no purpose for being there except to be the love interest, which is also annoying. But, that was the 80s. And there was no sex in this movie. It was PG. Yeah. And I can tell you that in the real hacker scene back then, there was a lot of sex and drugs and rock and roll. So there was only a little bit of rock and roll in this movie, and that was it.
Yeah, you never really see, obviously this is supposed to be, an elite technical university where the kids are just essentially just studying all the time and working on insane research projects and that sort of stuff. And they have the pool scene that we've referenced a couple times, which is just, it's so funny. And I look forward to it every time I watch this movie because it's so incongruous. They just take over in a lecture hall. And I guess Chris did it. Val Kilmer's character set this up because he sets up the laser to, bounce all over campus. And then there's a beam splitter that has a neon sign for this tanning invitational, which is just a hilarious name for this indoor pool party. But they take over a lecture hall, and he invites a bunch of girls from the beautician college down the road.
Yeah, the School of Beauty.
Right. Yes. And they're all just dancing, and it's this big scandal that Mitch is there instead of being in the lab, and he's eventually just sitting in the in the seat in the auditorium until Jordan comes in and drags him into the pool.
Yeah. And of course that's the only time that you see Chris Knight actually, doing anything with women. And, most he does is he comes up to one and takes the burger out of her hands and says, "Don't eat that. Don't you realize that these can give you really large breasts?" And he looks down and goes, "Oh no, I'm too late."
Yeah.
And that's about as racy as it gets.
It is. Yeah. Lindsay, were you expecting more dopey 80s gratuitous stuff in this?
I think it a little bit, just because I kind of know the different types of 80s movies that I've seen so far, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more of those types of pool scenes. It didn't come as a shock. So, for me at least, I felt they did a good job because that was pretty limited from my perspective, to maybe that scene and the other scene where, there was one other scene with the daughter of the person in the CIA.
Yes.
Where I was, it's a little weird, but
right.
It's just kind of classic 80s movies. So
very much so. Yeah. I mean, this is at a time when all of those 80s comedies were just, essentially just sex comedies. That was just what they were. And this is the rare example. I mean, this came out the same year as Weird Science, which I don't know if you've ever seen that, Linz, but that's kind of it's Anthony and Michael Hall. I can't remember the other kid's name, but they're nerdy kids who build the perfect woman out of a computer program. And she comes to life, literal teenage boy fantasy type stuff. Yeah. It's kind of the flip side of this coin, I think. This movie could have gone down that road, but instead it's just more of it's got some social commentary about we shouldn't be building space lasers to do targeted assassinations, but they do sort of it's so funny. I forget how little of that plot is actually in this movie. It's the first 4 minutes and then the very end. And that's basically it. There's the pressure on Jerry to get this done from the CIA. Every 20 minutes they're yelling at him.
And they're threatening to expose him because apparently, he's been siphoning off some of those funds to
build his house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Diverting funds from the CIA is not a career limiting move usually, I would think. But the rest of it is just sort of, a series of clever pranks and set pieces that they kind of string together with this, defense contract plot thing. Wendy, what's the stunt or the prank that you enjoy the most out of all the ones in this movie?
Oh gosh. I mean, I really love when they knock out Kent and they install a transmitter in his braces. It's like, who has braces in college? They had to have a nerd with braces. I love that. I thought it was really impressive what they had built for Laszlo Hollyfeld's his room deep down in the steam tunnels and everything that you needed to get down there. And every time we go in there, when I'm watching the movie with somebody else and he's working on a workstation, they go, "Oh, that's a symbolics." Because that was totally a thing, and there were people who were working on those in the 80s.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of call outs to things that I really still identify with, I guess.
Yeah, I think my favorite one is always when they disassemble Kent's car and put it in his room, which, is just great. And I think is a direct homage to those MIT pranks that I was mentioning earlier. It's great. Everything they do to Kent is just delightful because he's such a weasel, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, Linz, what did you think of like the Laszlo character? That's what we were talking about in the War Games episode, where I was trying to describe like this guy that lives in their closet, and you were like, what the hell are you idiots talking about?
Well, even when you were talking about, because White Lotus, I've watched all the seasons, and I was still like, which character are you talking about? But then as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, that's the guy in White Lotus, Napoleon Dynamite, like all the other ones. So I liked that aspect of it. It was just funny, like the randomness of it at first, like when he's walking in the room and Mitch like has his mirror to he's coming in.
Yeah.
But what I liked the most about that character though is like, I felt like, yes, there was a little bit of a plot of, pranks and lasers and all of that, but like, just like the pressure versus like goofing off that, you feel in college and higher ed, or even just like in your career. And I felt like having that character in this movie was like a good, like pointing out of, you can't be too serious. You need to have like empathy and all these different aspects. So like, I liked the layer that, the inclusion of his character brought to the movie.
Yeah.
And he was pretty autism coded in that. John Grise, the actor, was also he played a very similar character in the Pretender series. I don't know if you saw that one. That was a 90s series.
No, I haven't. Was that a sci-fi type?
Yeah, it was a sci-fi thing. And again, very shy, kind of withdrawn, but everybody loves him and they kind of take care of him.
Yeah. It's so funny because there's no real setup for it. You just see him walk out of the closet one time as Mitch is like putting his stuff away or something. And then he goes to talk to Val Kilmer's character. He's like, there's a guy that lives in our closet. And Val's like, oh, you see him too?
Yeah.
Like, kind of confirming like, I'm not crazy. This guy actually exists. And then he describes him as like, oh yeah, he was the guy in the 70s, the guy before Chris Knight, I guess, we're supposed to think, and just cracked under the pressure and now just lives in the steam tunnels and has that little like mousetrap car that goes down and like the whole thing that he's built in there, which is very, obviously like an exaggerated version, but, Wendy, you sort of described some of those pranks or explorations, and there were also just people like that hanging around, especially like we probably all three of us know people like that who, went to someplace like MIT or Berkeley or places like that and incredibly smart, but that was not the environment for them. They just like that kind of structure doesn't work for them or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
And they're off doing brilliant things, maybe not winning whatever the sweepstakes was, the McDonald's or the thing that he was doing, the auto pen to enter, which is another like thing that I kind of always forget about this movie, that Laszlo is down there, figuring out the odds of how to win 30% of the prizes in this sweepstakes, including a Winnebago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there was the wish fulfillment character, the one other woman who had like lines in there, and her whole purpose was to try to seduce all the smart guys.
The top 10. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris meets her at the very beginning of the movie when he's doing a tour of whatever that defense contractor company that, Hathaway is going to set him up with a job for. And he says, "Oh, how many of the top 10 have you met?" And she's like, 7. You would make 8. Like, oh, well, okay. And then she ends up with Laszlo at the end. And yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah. That does feel like a movie studio note where some executive was like, can we get a pretty blonde woman to throw in here just for a couple scenes?
Because these nerds never get any action.
Right. Yeah.
Clearly, they don't. Movie after movie, and it totally wasn't true.
Right. Yeah. Especially someone who looks like Val Kilmer. Mitch, you could understand. He's 15, but yeah. Wendy, I know you have like a connection to the University of Texas, which kind of, I have a feeling there were probably some pranks that might have gone on at UT. That seems like an environment where there might have been some shenanigans. I could see some involving maybe a cow mascot or something along those lines, but
yeah, that was more, football related. It wasn't the nerds blowing off steam. And in fact, when I was at UT, UT was one of the few universities and defense contractors and so on that were on the ARPANET at that time. So that's how I got to meet the folks from Stanford and Berkeley and MIT. And so, and Rutgers. So I hung out with them because there wasn't really that much of a local scene.
Yeah. I feel like the kind of harmless pranks, a lot of these are pretty elaborate and probably did some damage to the dorms or whatever. Like they do stick a laser right through the head of a statue at one point. But just kind of those good-natured, pranks have gone the way of the dinosaur. Those don't really exist anymore. Now you'd probably get in a lot of serious trouble for any of the stuff that they did.
Yeah, that's the trouble, especially something destructive like that powerful laser. I don't think we're letting undergrads play with lasers these days, are we? I have no idea.
Probably not.
No, it seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
It does strike me that you only really see, I think, maybe 2 people that have computers in this movie. Laszlo has his workstation down in the steam tunnel. Kent has one and Chris has one. Chris is never turned on as far as I know. I think it's
and there's one in the lab.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And Kent is, falling asleep while he's having that dream with the transmitter in his teeth, but it's not a very technology centric movie. A lot of it is sort of centered on sort of the, the hacker ethos that we've been talking about. Just kind of the playfulness and trying to figure out the way that things work and how to push the envelope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with almost anything you see there, it's like, what can we do with this? Again, in the 80s, one of the hackers I hung out with was Hobbit, who wrote the original Netcat. And I remember one time we were on a road trip from New Jersey up to New Hampshire, and he started dismantling the rental car. He was in the back seat. He started taking it apart while we were driving. And I'm like, Hobbit, knock it off. But this was the sort of thing that no matter what they had or what was in front of them, they'd what can I do with this?
Yeah. It's when I was in college in the 90s, like I had a computer, but there were plenty. I think I was still even in the minority. Most people were going to the computer lab if they needed to, print out a paper or write a paper or something like that. We had VAX systems at my university. Was like if you wanted to go use the VAX, you could in like a timeshare, and it cost money. You had to have an account, and it cost like, I don't even remember what it was, but obviously by the time you got to college, Lance, everybody had a computer, but yeah.
Yeah, it was very different for me, I would say. And now, I mean, people in college these days, like, it's even more kind of further down the line. They've got their own phones. Like, it makes me think of how different this movie would have been if it was set in 2025 or something. So
I don't think you could do that sort of movie
I think
here
you're
anymore.
right.
No, even just the technology aspect of it, and even just the whole plot line of the government contracting part of it, technology transfer, which was like a huge thing in the 80s. I mean, as you said, Wendy, a lot of universities were doing that kind of work. I'm sure there are some now, but that's not exactly the way that it works anymore. I don't think our universities are building lasers for intel agencies, but it's even, 5 years later, I don't think this movie would have worked very well, even in 90, because the internet existed then. It wasn't everywhere, but it was on a lot of university campuses, and it certainly would have been available at, Pacific Tech. Those dudes would have been spending all their time on computers.
Yeah, they would have been all busy. Even if they were in the same lab, they would all be busy messaging each other from their terminals.
Yes, messaging the person 4 feet away from you.
Yes,
and giggling,
which is what I used to do.
Even like the pranks in like the modern world, I would say, like, are much more like digitized or go through online. Like, I think now we have like memes, we have TikTok, we have all these ways of people doing like tongue-in-cheek things, but it's just not the same, I would say.
The closest thing that I can think of is like when Deviant Ollam posted about how to put a different sound chip, I think, in the traffic light pedestrian crossing.
Yeah.
You could have it say something else.
Yeah.
And somebody went and did it.
Right.
That's so true.
I mean, a lot of it now is more focused on, things like, I don't even know, they'd have to be individual products, like the kind of stuff that, folks like Joe Grand do, or things like that are, creative projects, like Joe builds the badges for DEF CON every year that do all kinds of cool shit, or he does like all kinds of other projects. And there's tons of hardware hackers that do the same thing, but they're not, so they're more private. They're not as like public facing as this kind of stuff would be, but it does have that aspect of they all sort of like band together in the middle of the movie to get back at Kent because he had screwed Chris out of, he had messed up the optics on the laser. And then towards the end of the movie, they all band together to get back at Hathaway because they figure out that he had tricked them into building this weapon. They just thought it was like a proof of concept, I guess. They weren't paying attention.
I don't know what they thought it was for, but it was
they didn't care.
neat and they wanted to build it.
Right. Yeah. That was kind of it. It was for the thrill of the chase, essentially. We could build a cool laser that nobody else can build because we're the smartest people on Earth. So they do that. They didn't realize it was going to be used as a space laser, which is it's a great 80s movie device, which leads to the absolute brilliant end scene where there's a throwaway thing earlier in the movie that I had forgotten completely about, where Chris shows up at Hathaway's house and he's eating a bag of popcorn.
Yes.
And Hathaway says, "Is that popcorn? Don't bring that in my house. I hate popcorn." And you're just like, okay, that's a weird line of dialogue. And he just throws it on the ground or whatever. And then
Chekhov's popcorn
in the biggest way possible. They just get a giant Jiffy Pop ball of popcorn and put it in his new house and, aim the space laser at and destroy the house, which is amazing. And if you go and read how they did that practically, not with a real laser, but they were literally popping popcorn for like 3 months straight leading up to this stunt to film it. And they still had to bring in like popcorn manufacturers had to help them by bringing in extra popcorn to do this. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, just because they could, they never stopped to think whether they should. And that sort of thing. Another thing we used to play with was, I don't know if you've heard of oobleck, a mixture of cornstarch and water, which makes a non-Newtonian fluid. So if you hit it really hard, it becomes solid. If you play with it very slowly, it moves like liquid. We used to play with that in like bathtubs. We did it in one hotel bathtub, and we actually broke the bathtub because we were wanging on it with a hammer, and it just forcibly unseated the tub, and we went oops and kind of snuck out of there. So all kinds of shenanigans, everything just about except for ones and zeros.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That kind of sounds like the slime that kids were making like 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah,
it was like a big
my
thing.
Kids were totally into that.
Yeah, mine too. We definitely replaced a carpet in my son's room because of that crap. Yeah. Not great. Yeah.
What are all these boxes of borax doing here?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Linz, you had no idea about the popcorn stunt was.
Well, yeah, what's funny is because I went and looked it up after and saw that fact, the production fact that you just mentioned, but I had no idea that was actual popcorn. And I was like, what, sort of, material are they using for this that's going to cause everyone to get cancer down the road? I was very concerned for the staff, the actors.
Well, they said that like they coated it all with some like liquid to make it fire retardant because they were really worried about it somehow catching on fire, which you see. I'm sure, some creative editing or whatever, but you see at the end, there's just all these extras like jumping into the mounds of popcorn and like shoving it in their faces. And I'm just like, oh my God, are any of these people still alive? Who knows what was happening then? It was 1984, not a lot of hygiene standards on movie sets, I would imagine.
Yeah. Boomers, Gen X, drinking from the garden hose, all that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Nobody knew where we were, Wendy.
Nobody knew where we were. Yeah.
It's hard to believe. Go ahead, Linz.
Well, then I was going to say it just led to like the best scene, which was like the end credit scene when the song, everyone's going to rule the world comes on, and you're just like, this is awesome. Everyone's like eating popcorn out of the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great.
And I would love to see a sequel. It's obviously 40 years too late now, but like, where did Laszlo go? He said they were going to Wyoming because that blonde woman had she said like a little vacation place in Wyoming or something.
Oh, that's right. She was a prepper.
Yes. She said a survival place. That's what it was. Yes. Which is another, 80s like thing of, when everybody else gets annihilated by nuclear bombs, I'll be fine in Wyoming. But yeah, them driving from California to Wyoming in the Winnebago, I'd watch that movie, the road trip movie with Laszlo and the woman whose name I don't even think we ever get her name.
What's her name?
I'm not sure.
Sharon?
Maybe. Yeah.
Sharon.
Sherry. Yeah. No,
there we
right.
go.
Sherry.
Sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. And anything else, Wendy? What did we forget? Any parting thoughts that you wanted to give us? I think we dug into your lore with this, but is there anything that we glossed over?
Can't think of anything. Yeah, just that I'm just so very sad that there are so many good lines from this that I just can't come out and post or say because nobody will get them. So I'm really glad that we're doing this podcast, and hopefully more people will want to watch the movie if they haven't seen it before.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I wrote down a whole bunch of the quotes in my notes because, like we said, it's just like a kind of a one-liner machine for a lot of it. I mean, a lot of them are just Chris Knight responding to people.
This, for example, is under H for toy.
Yes. When he's touring the defense contractor, the guy says, "You are Chris Knight, aren't you?" And he says, "I hope so. I'm wearing his underwear."
I'm wearing his underwear. I do use that line when somebody asks me, "Are you Wendy Nather?"
It's so good. They're just, I don't know who the joke writers were for this. It really has like the 80s stand-up comic feel to it, where, maybe they brought in, like Howie Mandel or something for like 2 days to write one-liners. I don't know. But
yeah, the one that I thought of was when the professor was like, "I want to see more of you," and Chris was just like, "Oh, fine, I'll gain weight."
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There was a mixture of the 80s stand-up and the kind of surreal jokes that, kind of came out with The Far Side.
Yes.
Or with even earlier in the 70s, Kleban, who drew really bizarre cartoons of cats.
Yeah, there's a lot of very absurdist stuff in there with, Chris is always wandering around in these t-shirts, like the I Love Toxic Waste t-shirt, which I definitely owned in, about 1988. I wish I still had it, honestly, but and there's so many other ones. One that says like Surf Nicaragua, which, so incongruous, but in all the graffiti in the hallway in their dorm, which I kept trying to like freeze frame and read, but they never really give you a good head on shot. It's always like an oblique sort of, you can get a little bit of it, but there's a ton of little Easter eggs in there too. He's always wearing like bunny slippers and goofy shit like that. There's a bunch of comic books lying around that I guess have some people, have sort of identified the theme of some of the comic books that are sitting around in their room to some of the themes in the movie and things like that. So
it must have been so much fun dressing that set. And doing the costumes and everything. Especially
Chris and Mitch's room and Laszlo's lair,
Yeah.
Must have been a blast. Yeah. Well, this, again, one of my favorites, and I'm so glad we got to share this with you, Wendy. It's great to see you. And, thank you so much for coming on. You were a big part of Decipher from the beginning, so it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to hang out with you two again.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for coming on.